Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. I'm on a swingy chair. So I've never actually been on a swingy chair during a podcast episode before, so we're about to see how this goes. It could be tragic.
Quite wobbly as well.
Is that my voice could just go in and out of sound. Mate, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast with me. You're actually my first person I'm recording in 24, so this is a major privilege for you.
First one of the new year.
Yeah, so you could either be the best or the worst. I don't know what way you want to interpret that.
Well, all I would take is that I'm definitely going to be the best for at least a short period of time. So,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. You're
So
going to have at least a week of being the best person I've ever spoken to on my podcast in
2024. Exactly. The next people, they're just going to knock me off that perch.
That's really cool and very funny. So when we first connected, it was on the basis that you were starting a new venture in estate agency, which is a world that you figured out that I very much do not understand.
Yeah.
And you were curious about the idea of how could you market houses more creatively. Tell me about that desire, and also I guess tell us why you jumped into starting your own business in estate agency.
Yeah.
Is it something that you find creatively compelling to be in that industry? And also, tell us about the whole marketing thing.
Well, I mean, firstly, the podcast is supposed to be like a conversation. You just given me like a whole topic which I could talk about for an hour at least. So we'll break it down. But first off, I mean, I left my previous firm, and one of the main drivers for me on that was feeling quite frustrated.
Right.
And that came from numerous different places. But one of those main frustrations was around being able to have that autonomy and that creativity to be able to do the job the best way I wanted to and get the most out of it. Yeah. So that was a major driver to go, this can be different.
Do you think is that quite unique for you in that industry to feel that way? Or is that something that other people would sympathize with?
I think that you'll see at the moment that there's been, within the industry, there's been a big change. So you the way the world's changed since COVID and with social media becoming such a huge thing, more people have left the safety of the bigger firm because you don't need that bigger firm platform to reach people.
Right.
So you can reach them through social media, but in order to be successful in doing that, you've got to be creative, you've got to be able to put yourself out there a bit. So you'll see now there's this more sort of broker model where people have left that bigger firm and have gone out on their own because they can make an impact that way. But the people who've generally made that jump have been the ones who've probably thought, this is something that I really want to explore. And I can do that by being creative with it.
And what about the creative marketing thing? So obviously it seemed like from the get-go you were interested in trying to do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we first spoke, so we were put in touch by a mutual friend of ours, and
the generous benefactor of our location as well.
Exactly. These beautiful homes we're sat in, which are available for sale. And you just contact me.
Exactly.
That. So Ed suggested that we talk because my remit was I didn't want a property photographer or videographer because I didn't want somebody to take the vision that I had and basically try and put it back into that mold of this is how we market property. So coming to you, and I seem to remember having the conversation, and Ed was like, you could talk to Matt. Yeah, he kind of does like pretty hard hitting stuff. And like, he's out there interviewing people who are, in all different walks of life and different challenges and that sort of stuff, and it's pretty compelling things. And I'm thinking, And I remember when I phoned you and I sort of went, I'm an estate agent, and I could almost hear you switching off at the other end of the phone being like, that's not what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, brilliant. I knew this day would come.
Yeah. And I felt like I almost had to go into a bit of a sales pitch of no, please listen, because that's not what I want. Yeah, I don't want somebody to come in here and kind of do the same thing that's being done elsewhere. So
did that take a level of bravery then on your part to kind of step out of that mold?
Yeah, I think because you're always worried about kind of whether people are going to think your ideas are any good or not. So it's putting yourself in a position where you can be a bit vulnerable. But I think actually having left my job at that stage gave me a bit more courage to do that.
Yeah, and I guess you had already done the bit which made you more vulnerable in a way. And you, by stepping out of what sounds to me from our previous conversations like good security, good brand, good, lots of perks maybe that came with that kind of lifestyle after a long time kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been there for 12 years doing that, but I'm very lucky on the basis that I've got an incredibly supportive wife, who was able to pick up the burden of kind of, everything on that side, and allow me to then go and follow this dream.
Just to jump into the new thing. So you were already kind of in a vulnerable position in terms of starting out a new business and taking that risk. So I guess you were, because of that vulnerability you already had, maybe the creative choice to try it a little bit differently didn't feel as vulnerable as it could have done. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think when we first spoke about it, I kind of saw it as a bit of a shot to nothing of like, let's see what happens with this. If it comes out, brilliant. And then as we went more through the process and we got to the point where it was like, actually, there's something real here, and seeing the first videos that we'd produced and then putting them out there in the world, suddenly that changed massively for me of like, oh, actually, now this is really important because it's really good. I was like, if it was rubbish, I'd have been a bit like, exactly, it won't matter so much. But because it was really good, and I thought, actually, this is going to be incredible. I then suddenly got really nervous about it. But the feedback I had was fantastic.
That's really cool. Just to explain the concept that we kind of landed upon for marketing houses was that we would anthropomorphize. I think that's the word, the houses, give them a character. We gave one a very distinctly posh English voice, and I can't remember what was the character of the other one. One was like a posh English fella.
Well, the other one was voiced by Jess in the end, wasn't it?
The other one was Jess. And so what did you call that? Kind of Essex girl. Happy girl.
It was a sort of fun, creative vibe,
like a fun, happy vibe for sure. And how did people kind of respond on the basis that obviously not only you were working with clients who were interested in selling their houses, but also so they're kind of your clients, but you're also searching for people who would buy the house. So you kind of have the two sides of the clientele in your industry.
Yeah, so I suppose the client side of things, generally most clients are kind of happy that if it's going to help sell their house, then fine, do what you want on that side. But this was a little bit different because of the way we'd approached it. You're giving somebody whose home is something that they've lived, breathed, created, an identity. And it's whether that identity actually works with what they have in their head. Because suddenly you've put a voice to it and everything else. And if that's totally different to the way you would have seen it, that could be a bit jarring.
It's like, don't missell my house.
Exactly.
It's like, this is not some Essex girl.
So it was so that was a little bit kind of when you first showed it to the clients as to and the reaction I got was really positive on that side. The second point of that is it going to reach an audience? And because it's different, it really did. So the first thing I did was I've got a group of part of the network, estate agency network of independent agents, and I put it into the WhatsApp group there, and literally just like the whole WhatsApp exploded of like comments, loads of comments about everyone going, wow, this is amazing, kind of, because we used a few I would say special effects. You'd
Special
probably be like,
effects
it was
is
a bit
like fishing wire, fishing
and
wire to
stood behind
pull
a
doors
curtain.
open.
Yeah. So from that perspective, it was
Low budget special effects. That's what it was.
But they were kind of blown away by that. Go, wow, this is really amazing as to how it looks. And then once it went out into the world, loads of comments coming back from people saying this is really different. So, and the whole point of it is, it's not there to show you the house in full detail. We've got all the glossy photos and the videos and everything else which do that. This was much more, it's there to be something that picks up on the social media side of things and drives people to, oh, that looks interesting, let's go and research it a bit more.
Was it just kind of gut instinct that a more creative approach would maybe be helpful, or is there some more well thought through reason as to why you thought a more creative approach would work?
I think because of going out and doing it on my own, you've got to be different. So I think from that perspective, I had confidence that a more creative approach would work, because I'm lucky on the basis that the product, the homes that I work with, are generally pretty special.
Right.
So they kind of will sell themselves if you can get the right people engaged in looking at them. So in my mind, the more creative you can be with that, the wider the audience you're going to reach, and therefore the better result. So I was pretty confident that a more creative approach would do it. And I really wanted something that was going to make me stand out. But also scratch that itch that I have personally of kind of just doing something and creating something that's a bit different.
And that itch just developed over the 12 years of working in a more, I don't understand, just a more standardized company. Is that how you describe it?
Oh yeah. I mean, it kind of, I think I've always liked doing creative things, and working in an environment where you don't have that creativity because you've got to be on brand the whole time. Everything's got to be checked to the right tone of voice and all this sort of stuff. I did feel that kind of stifled that creativity. So for me, being in a position where you could do something different was really important. But it's kind of looking, I think it was maybe almost a little bit of this is something for me, rather than as much as it was for the business. It was like, actually, this is just really important for me to do something like that.
Yeah, because I think it's perhaps it would be easy to dismiss something like setting up an estate agency business, which is what it is, right? Just to clarify. It would easily dismiss something like that as, it's about driving just revenue and it's just a profitable idea. When actually, just like all other businesses, or not all other businesses, it's fully well arguable that it's a creative endeavor and something that you're just having to respond to because it is just the next right thing that feels right for you to engage with.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt about it? Or?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting in the industry, you get the majority of the types of people who work in the business get their biggest kick out of, the sale goes through, ring the bell, whatever they want to do. We're getting paid. This is brilliant. For me, that's never been where I've got the kick out of it. The kick out of it has always been seeing the journeys that people go on.
Right.
Because, I mean, it sounds cliche, but your moving house is one of the biggest things you're ever going to do in your life.
For sure.
I mean, next to having a baby, doing all that sort of stuff, moving house is a huge deal. And everybody comes at it from a different point of their journey. Sometimes it's a really happy place to be. Sometimes it's not. The joke is that it's either death, divorce, or debt, in a lot of places, which are really difficult times for people. So being that person that can be, what do you need to be? You need to be a friend to people. You need to be a counselor at sometimes. You need to be somebody who's going to put a deal together for them, and somebody who's going to act with their best interest at heart. So that's always been what really excites me about the job, helping people through those processes. So other times it's a really happy place to be because they're moving to something that's going to enrich their lives. And you just want to make that experience as good as it can be.
Yeah, I think that I actually really admire what you set out to do, because it kind of put a challenge that spun back around on me, because when I first started my business, which I'm actually looking at shutting down and going back to being a sole trader and just being a bit more creative in a sense, and freeing up some of that what was given to growing a business, just being creative. And I realized after working with you that even though, quote unquote, I am someone people go to when they want to do creative things because I'm identified as a creative person, actually, just like all other careers and jobs and vocations that you work on, I can end up batch producing and batch ideas of things and falling in line and just doing the day by day stuff. And what you somehow managed to do, whether by brilliance or luck, whatever, let's go with brilliance.
Yeah.
Is by taking that risk of saying, actually, you know what, like, you want to be wise and sensible and grow and have recognizable beats of estate agency business that people can engage with. But by doing that creative thing, you stepped out and became bigger in and of yourself. And it was a more interesting thing to work with and more exciting for you. And actually, one of the realizations I had was, actually, maybe I've stopped being creative in my own sense in terms of, well, what am I doing differently? It's easy to say, estate agents is a more STEM kind of career. And here I am meeting this guy who's just like, I want to try something different. I want to have a go at being imaginative within my job.
Yeah.
And actually, I realized from our interaction that I was like, you know what? I'm not sure when the last time was that I was imaginative in terms of my own working life, or even just my own personal life. And when we first met, I've been beginning to get some stuff off the ground. But actually, since reflecting on our working together, I've gone on this little bit of a journey of going, actually, you know what? Like, this guy's onto something in terms of, can I be a bit different and express myself differently?
Yeah.
Even if it's going to take that extra effort. Because for you, it would have been cheaper, quicker, easier just to phone up the normal team and be like, can you just come and, produce the standard stuff? And I think it's a real encouragement. It was a real encouragement to me, but actually I think the encouragement serves to anyone listening to this, that, there was more worth in it than obviously just the business thing. There was something personal for you that came out of it.
Yeah, and it sounds like we're talking about a similar thing of actually it gave me a bit more purpose, which I think we were talking briefly beforehand about. Actually, I found a lot of my peers, friends, at a stage where they followed one particular track of their career from school, either done the whole university thing and kind of just then gone into something from there, or life has just led them down a particular path. And reaching the age we are now, for my group of friends in their early 40s, it's that point of kind of going, okay, now do I want to carry this on?
Yeah.
And all I can see is just a whole car crash of people going, hold on a minute, really, I want something that's maybe got a bit more purpose to it, and that allows me to do other things in my life. And a lot of that comes down from, I want something that's going to flex that kind of creative, imaginative muscle that maybe I haven't used because I've just been going down this path that's been laid out.
So let's ask the big question then. Like, how are you identifying your purpose at the moment?
I don't really know is the honest answer, but it's something that for the first time in my life, I'm starting to think about more.
Right.
Kind of, do I wish I'd started to think about that a whole heap earlier? No, I'm not that kind of person.
You don't want to throw away life on, if only I.
No, and I one of the things that I'm thinking about more and more now is the fact that, actually from a background perspective, from a culture perspective, everything else, pretty much as privileged as it possibly can be, and I think with that comes, you got to do what you can with that and make the most of that opportunity and help as many people, and that's what I'm excited about in my new venture, is that opportunity to be able to be creative myself, but I also want to build kind of a community and a group of people together that that can do those sorts of things. So one of the ideas that I was thinking about was kind of whether or not we could use what we did together, but actually then look at speaking to students who are working in universities and whatever about kind of giving some work experience and kind of utilize it, giving people an opportunity to work in a different environment. But I'd never have had the opportunity to think about stuff like that. If I hadn't.
I think it's interesting actually when we talk about purpose, how, and I wonder whether it could be an age thing, that as just we get older, that there is that sense of, part of purpose is the handing on to the next generation, and everything I've learned, let me give it to someone else so they can benefit from it. How do you imagine your peers are doing that? Would you say they would maybe reconcile with that, or do you really feel like with your kind of peer group, do you feel like this is the beginning of them questions, and it's just kind of like, you know what, we don't know what our purpose is and we don't know how to go about finding out what it is anyway? Do you feel like there's a bit of a gap in knowledge maybe?
I mean, I think I feel personally that I'm probably a few years ahead of a lot of my peers with that journey. We had our children slightly earlier on that side, so they're now in their teens. My friends that had their kids a little bit later, they're sort of, and I can see myself having gone through, the last few years of my previous career weren't the best, because I was just I was just going through the motions, if I'm honest. Because I had it wasn't fulfilling me in doing the job. So I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, actually I can just do this at a certain level, which is going to meet all the criteria I need to meet, but it's not meeting that important one, which is giving something back to me and making me feel like I'm valued in what I'm doing. And I look at my peers and my family and whatever at the moment, and I see lots of people sat in that same space. I think there's a lot more work that could be done to help people move through that. Because they're just lost. And it's cliched, isn't it? Kind of you get to that midlife point and do you go out and buy a sports car? Do you have an affair? Do you whatever you do? And actually, lots of my friends are not doing those things because that's not the people that they are. But they're also really struggling to find how do I move through this, rather than how do I divert off something, and I'm just going to carry on the same track. I want to make that change. Because
that obviously that midlife crisis that you've just identified with gets associated almost with, well, either you stay the same or you just do careless things. And obviously there's a third better answer, which is, how can I make wise choices that kind of enable me to continue to grow? And that's when you're kind of, like you said, on the treadmill of life, especially if you've come from perhaps even in the last 20 years, the generations changing in that sense of doing a career for much longer. Even I'm only 12 years younger than your generation, and that mindset of being somewhere for 20 years or whatever is rapidly kind of got knocked on the head. But the idea of being in a career that you've done for 10, 12, 20 years, whatever it may be, you're doing that every day. The idea to then go, oh, how do I now equip myself with the wisdom, the intelligence, the time, the resources to go about identifying my purpose? It's like, where do you even start with that? It's in some ways, it's almost like I would love to think you could just type it into, chat. Exactly. or even just engage with a YouTube channel or a podcast or whatever it may be. But that's a really deep question that takes years to answer, or a lifetime to answer in some ways. And if you're stuck kind of for probably quite, a reasonable means in, like, you know, if you've got a family and a mortgage or whatever, you know, you can't just ditch everything to go pursue your you know, your real purpose or whatever
I
that
think
may
it's
be.
it's interesting because if you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you can have that flexibility to to not have to do the grind as much, to pay the bills, and you can have that bit of space to get out there and then start that journey. Great. If you can't, then then it's an awful lot more difficult. For me, I was lucky enough to be in a position where I could take that sort of change, in our sort of life setup. But I think for me, it's that thing of kind of going, well, actually, as you say, you're also talking to a group of people potentially who don't have the skills to really ask themselves those questions. So things like doing this sort of podcast, for me, is that opportunity to kind of almost think about things a lot whilst having a conversation about it, which is not something I would do normally. I don't generally sit around thinking about a lot of stuff. And interesting, I find for me personally, the time when I allow myself that sort of opportunity to delve a little bit deeper and to mull things over, because I do a lot of running.
Right. Yeah.
Is when I get out there and just, if I'm running, it kind of takes away a lot of the sort of the noise.
Yeah.
Because my mind is occupied with of doing the action of just keeping going.
Yeah.
And then it actually frees me up to be able to go, okay, well, let's mull these ideas over.
Right.
So I'll often come back from a run thinking, right, what were the 1, 2, there were 3 things I thought about, I kind of need to write them down quickly because they'll just disappear otherwise.
Yeah, man. So how often do you go for a run?
No, I'd probably run 4 or 5 times a week.
So you're like, you're deep in running culture.
Oh yeah.
You're a park runner or?
No, I do like ultra marathons.
Yeah,
so
okay.
kind of 50, 100 mile.
Yeah, exactly. 50, 100 mile.
So
what's that like? Because to be honest with you, like I had to drive. It wasn't quite 50 miles to get here, and I was like, that was long. So imagine running here, basically.
So the one that I did, the last one I did, which was 100 miles, was from Winchester to Eastbourne. That's like most people can visualize kind of like how far that is across the South Downs.
Was it like bad weather or was it all right?
It was in the summer, so it was hot, which was not great. But that was just under 24 hours to do that. But did you stop or stop? You walk quite a bit, stop for a break here and there, but it's generally pretty much you just got to keep going. But I've had some of the most, I suppose, frank and honest conversations with people out there in that process, because people are just completely broken down. Right. All the barriers disappear, because all the bravado, everything else after being out there for 12, 14, 15, 16 hours, bit of sleep deprivation, it's all gone. So you are just...
It's a real leveler of people.
Yeah, and also probably with people that you're running with, potentially you're never going to see them again. So interestingly, people are just like, I'll just tell you everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've got time as well. So it's been quite eye-opening on that side.
Wow, gosh. And for you, because my dad's a big runner.
Yeah.
He's not ultra marathon material.
He's fast.
But he's fast. Yeah. He's a bit like a mountain goat, my dad. And he's a bit more marathon level, not quite ultra marathon. And I think he resonates very much with you in that sense of, it seems to perform a function of allowing your brain, and I know there's loads of really good conversations about it and loads of really good books about this. I'm not really a runner. I'm kind of like, I would love to run more kind of position, and every now and then I get into it and then I stop. But it does perform this mystical function of your, the rhythm of moving forward and your body all being involved in a single activity. Seems to allow your brain to engage with, I don't know whether it's higher thinking, whether you would call it that, or just there's like a centering meditative kind of thing that occurs, isn't there, when that?
I think the rhythm of it is something, and once you reach that level where you're able to run comfortably without it being a stress.
Yeah.
You know, because if you're going out and you're doing either a hard run or like you're just starting out and it's really
It
hard
just
to run for
sucks. Yeah.
half an hour or whatever, it just sucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not really going to be in that space where you can do that kind of thinking. But if you're at a level where you've got some fitness and you can go out and run for however long it is, but I find that sort of that repetition, that rhythm of it, and that sort of side of things is something that does, as I said, it just enables me to be able to kind of go, all the noise just goes away, and I could just let my brain tick over without having to have too much direction involved in that. Whereas on a day-to-day basis, I'm really not very good at doing that because I just find that I'm running around all the time, occupying myself.
Going to the next job, the next conversation. And actually, I wonder whether as well, like perhaps a strangely obvious benefit of running is that you can't be looking at your phone or your emails.
Yeah.
There's almost like a really simple connection between I am fully engaged in this thing, thereby I'm not concentrated on the next email or whatever. Whereas, pretty much all other times your phone or whatever is right with you.
I think it's interesting, from a change perspective, I found that going through changing the job I'm doing and all that sort of stuff, I used to hate going for a walk with the dogs. Right. Because like I'd be like, the end of that field, like I could run there in like 3-4 minutes. It's gonna take me half an hour to walk there. This is ridiculous. It's so slow.
What a waste of time.
What a waste of time this is. I could do like 5 times as much as this if I was running. And now I really enjoy it because actually just being able to slow down and be like, okay, I can still have that space, but actually I can just do it whilst going for a walk, instead of thrashing myself on that side. I find that's been a change I've noted, that I can slow down a little bit, don't have to do everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
That's like that in itself is beautiful, isn't it? And in terms of that, revisiting that, well, how do you pursue finding out your purpose and stuff? In a sense, just the ability to, or beginning that ability to slow down enough to walk the dogs for half an hour is I'm not saying it's easy, but it is simple.
It is simple, but I mean, I think the whole purpose conversation, it's such a big thing that I think when you can find those small parts of it that just give you that, okay, this is good for me. And this is going to be good for the people that are around me because I'm doing this thing. And actually it is fulfilling that, whatever that purpose is going to be. I mean, with anything I've done, and certainly the ultra marathon side of things has taught me this as well, is that if you look at something like purpose as one thing, it's just like, it's too big. Doing an ultra marathon is too big. But the only way you get to the end of these things, or get to the end of them, or actually go through that journey, because it's not the ending. I'll talk about that in a minute, but the going on that sort of step-by-step process, you've got to break it down into little chunks. So if you're looking for that purpose, it doesn't have to be that overall encompassing thing. It just has to be things that actually move you forward in that direction.
Just to the next bit.
Exactly.
Because I've had I've still struggled with it on and off with my mental health, but I've definitely had, when I've had really deep, profound times of struggling with my mental health, even sometimes that purpose of, I'm just going to make Jess a cup of tea. That's enough purpose to move the needle forward. I don't need a purpose of changing the world or writing a book or convincing someone that this should happen. In that moment, it's enough of a purpose, and a good and healthy purpose, just to, show some kindness and generosity of my time to make someone else a cup of tea. And, like you said, the parallel with running an ultra marathon, in the sense of right now, in this moment, it's enough for me just to run to that tree.
Just to keep moving forward. Just put one foot in front of the other. But interesting, when I finished the one I mentioned, I got to the end of that and I had absolutely zero sense of satisfaction.
That's really interesting.
Nothing.
Just
Relief,
nothing.
like in bucket loads for finishing. The pain was over and it was done. And the guys that helped me do it, immense gratitude to them, but no feeling of satisfaction. And I think that's something that I've taken forward on this kind of like, what am I looking for the purpose aspect of things, is there is no end point to that.
Yeah.
You can't,
there's no final destination where it all suddenly,
it all comes together in a moment of, reflection or whatever. If you can be happy that actually what you're doing is just moving you in a direction that, is making you feel good about what's going on and benefiting other people around you, then that's enough.
And is that leaking into how you're running your business?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Because I'm not, the way that I've set things up is that it will be limited in terms of the client numbers. So because I want to be able to actually do something that adds value to the process.
Yeah.
And so that people at the end of it kind of go, do you know, that was really good.
Right.
And I want people and clients that are going to be friends and repeat clients for years. Because actually you form that relationship, they trust you. That has an immense amount of value to me, but also to them. Rather than being on the treadmill of next client, next client, next client, next client, next client, and just kind of move on to the next person. It shouldn't. That's not what it's about.
I think it's interesting as well that one of the thoughts I've just had is that oftentimes when I don't know if there's anyone that could say with 100% confidence, this is my purpose, but it strikes me that when we are talking the language of purpose, we're talking qualitative rather than quantitative anyway. If we were to identify your greater purpose as selling 1 million homes. Oh no, that's a lot of homes. That's too many homes. I don't like 10,000 homes in the next 20 years or whatever you would call it. Then actually it is just a race. It's just like I just got to get there and nothing else matters. I've just got to sell the homes. Whereas if we identify our purpose as, I want to be known as someone that creates a really like wonderful space for people to move and change their home. Actually, you know what? Suddenly every hour is full of purpose when you're doing that, because just one phone call creates what your purpose is. Rather than, if you're focused on, I just need to sell the house, then, on that process that you're going through, which I'm guessing sometimes can be quite a lengthy one. It's going to be hard to identify purpose in every day. The only days that have any purpose almost are the days where you actually sell a house. Rather than the other way around, which is, I had enough purpose today because I had a good conversation and made someone feel valued and heard. And I wonder whether that's such a helpful, that could be a helpful distinguisher in trying to find a purpose which makes sense for every day, is really focusing down on that qualitative purpose rather than quantitative, which so much of our, everyone that lives in Western culture is to some degree. Maybe we're stepping out of it, but we've had the wall pulled over our eyes when it comes to quantitative kind of figures. Like my purpose is to have 500,000 for when I retire, or whatever that may be. Like, it just feels like all of the purpose will arrive at the end of the race, which, and we're pretty sure it won't feel that great.
I mean, I think having listened to what you've just said there, interestingly for me, when I was finished that race, I didn't have any satisfaction. When I crewed for one of my friends and he did something incredible of running 86 miles, and we spent the day looking after him, and it wasn't just the day, it's the preparation, it's everything. At the end of that, I had so much more satisfaction, so much more kind of like, this is great seeing him achieve that. But it was going through each of those little bits, on the way. And just as you say, that quality of kind of helping somebody achieve that, for me,
it's just so bizarre, isn't it? It just shows you how, are measuring for what it means to be a fulfilled human being.
We've got it all wrong.
Like, it feels like we are just, me included in that, like, we have to take note when our feelings, our emotions, our hearts are telling us, actually, you know what was more satisfying than running an ultra marathon was helping my friend run an ultra marathon. That says so much. Like that's so much about being a human being is just captured in that one observation.
Yeah, but I think we lose so much of that because you're consistently bombarded all day long and never given that space to kind of slow down and think about what it might actually be rewarding in your life, as opposed to just keep going with all the stuff. And nowadays, with being able to just occupy yourself on social media for hours at a time doing basically nothing, just moves us further away from that. So
I'm going to finish with this question, and because you work with houses, I feel like your brain might be quite squished into the answer. I've taken to asking various people on the podcast to name 5 uses for a brick, and I'll tell you why I'm asking you to do that after you've answered my question.
5 uses for a brick. So I think, what would I say? 5 uses for a brick. You could throw it through a window.
That says a lot.
You could stand on it, because then you'd be a little bit taller, able to see a bit further. You could throw it in a swimming pool, and then people could jump in and pick it back out again. Like learning how to
like a game.
swim and do that sort of stuff, like a game. Yeah. You could, on the game front, you could make you'd need a piece of wood as well. I don't know if I'm allowed a piece of wood, but you could make a ramp out of it for a bike.
Okay, well, it's questionable, but what would it be called? Is it a pivot, not a pivot, or a stand?
Or you could just put the brick down and try and do one of those like wheelie things over it.
Oh, that's true.
So you don't need the ramp.
You don't need the wood. I appreciate that.
You could just do that. You could, if you needed to make a fire, you could put the brick down on the floor so you didn't burn what was underneath, but then you'd need other stuff for it.
That's 5. That's 5. And ding, ding, ding. I feel as though we have the best 5 answers so far. So one of the things that Professor Jordan Peterson suggests is a good way of measuring creativity.
Right.
Is how divergent our thinking can be about an object. And the kind of further away from its normal use, the more divergent, the more creative the thinking. But you obviously don't want to push it so far that it is no longer recognizable as being a brick, because that's just that's random, unhelpful thinking.
I could just make.
But I'm quite impressed, given you're surrounded by bricks all day, every day, working in houses. I mean, I guess anyone that works in any form of building is surrounded by bricks all day, every day.
Yeah,
you don't need to work specifically with the selling of them to be surrounded by the bricks that they're made out of.
Yeah.
But that was a very impressive answer. I think you're probably the best so far.
Well, certainly the best of 2024.
Certainly the best of 2024. And on that note, I just remains to say thank you so much.
Well, I'm immensely grateful for actually you reaching out to me and coming on, because as I said, it's all part of the journey for me of going down that route of maybe doing a little bit more thinking about things. So it's great.
Amazing, man. Thanks so much. Where can people find the creative work that you're doing, or indeed find one of these wonderful houses that you're selling?
The easiest thing to do is look at the Instagram. So it's Oliver_of_Olivers. So it's really easy to find. And everything's sort of linked through there. So go and check it out.
Amazing. Cheers, bro. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
That was quality.
Is that right?
That was so good. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.